Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, voters head to the polls for today's primaries.
Meanwhile, fighting intensifies in Gaza.
And the number of foreign-born Americans explodes under Joe Biden. All right, but first in New York, Michael Cohen, the ex-personal lawyer to former President Donald Trump, pointed the finger at his former boss in yesterday's testimony over hush money payments. The alleged $130,000 payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels is at the very center of the ongoing criminal trial, the first of its kind against a former American president. Cohen, who, by the way, has previously pled guilty to perjury, told jurors that he made that payment on Trump's order and was paid back through monthly installments labeled simply as legal services. Prosecutors now say that those payments violated campaign finance law. Trump denies all wrongdoing, and meanwhile, his ongoing legal saga is actually winning him some sympathy from some surprising sources. CNN's Fareed Zakaria says he believes the New York trial is politically motivated.
Whatever opposition he faced in the primaries has largely melted away. And the trials against him keep him in the spotlight, infuriate his base, who sees him as a martyr, and even may serve to make him the object of some sympathy among people in general who believe that his prosecutors are politically motivated. This happens to be true, in my opinion. I doubt the New York indictment would have been brought against a defendant whose name was not Donald Trump.
According to a recent CNN poll, the majority of Americans don't believe Trump will receive a fair trial in New York.
And on the same legal topic here, the criminal trial for Senator Bob Menendez, who might be better remembered as Gold Bar Bob, kicked off yesterday. He faces 16 felony counts over charges that he traded his influence to Egypt for hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, including gold bars and a Mercedes-Benz car. It's also the first time a sitting senator is accused of conspiring to act as a foreign agent. Menendez denies wrongdoing. The court documents hint he may blame his wife, Natalie, who faces similar charges in a separate trial. He also claims that he stockpiles cash as a coping mechanism for traumatic events in his past. This is now the second corruption trial in his career. Menendez refuses to resign his seat. However, he has lost the chairmanship of the Foreign Relations Committee and the support of his fellow Democrats. The trial is expected to last through June.
A lot of legal drama on both sides there. Meanwhile, voters in West Virginia, Maryland, and Nebraska head to the polls for today's high-stake primary races, setting up the playing field for the November general election. Starting in Maryland, where Republicans are hoping to flip a Senate seat long controlled by Democrats by nominating popular former Governor Larry Hogan, who was considered the frontrunner for the nomination. Democrats will have to defend 23 out of 34 Senate seats this November. Another one of them is in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin is not seeking re-election this year. Republicans are feeling pretty confident about picking up his seat, as Donald Trump carried the state in 2020. Term-limited Governor Jim Justice is favored to win tonight. Meanwhile, several House seats are also up for grabs. Republican Don Bacon is looking to fend off more conservative challenger Dan Fry in Nebraska's 2nd District. Biden swept the district in 2020, netting him an electoral vote in the process despite losing the state overall, and that's due to Nebraska's unique election rules.
Meanwhile, 3 new surveys show Trump is leading in key swing states. According to the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Siena College, the former president is ahead of Biden in 5 out of 6 swing states. When third-party candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was included, Trump jumped from a 6-point lead to a 9-point lead in Arizona, and he jumped 1 point in Nevada from 13 to 14 points. Siena College says large majorities in each state trust Donald Trump to do a better job on the country's financial well-being than Joe Biden. The New York Times added that Trump is leading in the very states that President Biden won in 2020, namely Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia.
And you know, it's been an open question this whole time if RFK Jr. is going to pull more from Trump or Biden in the general election. This poll at least seems to suggest that he's going to be taking more away from Biden, but we'll have to see because we've seen polls showing different things on that.
Right, who knows? Honestly, it's really hard to know which poll to trust at this time.
It's just the nature of polling in 2024.
Right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, House Republicans are preparing to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan formally recommended those charges yesterday. The potential charges come as Garland, since February, has refused to comply with a subpoena for audio tapes of special counsel Robert Hur's interview with President Biden over his alleged mishandling of classified documents. And if you remember, these would be the same interview tapes that ultimately led to her describing Biden as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The House Oversight Committee will meet on Thursday to move things forward. Oversight Chair James Comer said there must be consequences for refusing to comply with lawful congressional subpoenas, and we will move to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Comer says those files are important for oversight concerning Biden's fitness for office.
And let's take a look at the college campus protests, where some students are saying the quiet part out loud about anti-Semitism. Looking at the top 25 national universities, an alarming 67% of students say that anti-Semitism is a problem on their campus. The majority of that group list anti-Semitism as a small problem, but 14% classify it as a huge problem. By contrast, 1/3 say that it is not a problem at all. This information comes from the U.S. News and World Report. Meanwhile, Pamela Nadell, the director of the American University's Jewish Studies program, commented on the data, saying it is nothing new. Nadell said, quote, "Every time events erupt in Israel, they trickle out into the U.S." She further explained that while the protest began as a reaction to the war, it so often morphs into tropes that are deeply anti-Semitic. Students from these universities say the protests are making their campuses a more difficult environment to continue their studies. And we'll be looking into more coverage regarding the war in Gaza when we come back from this next break.
Many mothers find strength in the experience of giving birth as they overcome physical challenges and embrace the journey of bringing a new life into the world. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
In this episode, let's journey back to the early days of the Roman Empire, where we'll explore the reign of an emperor who, to be honest, was not as famous for any particular action or maneuver he performed, as much as he was simply famous for the time in which he was emperor. He was the successor to the great Augustus Caesar, and he reigned in Rome from the year 14 AD to 37 AD.
To watch more episodes of A Moment in History, go to FISM.tv.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, U.S. officials are certain of one thing regarding Rafah: there are enough Israeli troops on the city's edge for a full-scale incursion. But there is uncertainty about whether Israel has decided to carry out that move, according to two senior administration officials. Tensions remain high as the White House watches closely to see if Israel will defy months of warnings regarding the South Gaza city. The administration says they will not supply U.S. arms for a full Rafah assault.
We still believe would be a mistake to launch a major military operation into the heart of Rafah that would put huge numbers of civilians at risk without a clear strategic gain. The president was clear that he would not supply certain offensive weapons for such an operation were it to occur. It has not yet occurred, and we are still working with Israel on a better way to ensure the defeat of Hamas everywhere in Gaza, including in Rafah.
Israel has increased bombardment of the city over the past 2 weeks in what they say is a targeted operation against tunnels and militant infrastructure. The United Nations Aid Agency for Palestinians says that over 360,000 civilians have already fled Rafah as the humanitarian situation becomes dire.
Meanwhile, the war saw some of its most intense fighting in weeks yesterday. In the south, Israeli forces pushed across a highway into Rafah, while troops in the north recaptured an area from Hamas terrorists. The uptick in fighting comes on the heels of Israel's Memorial Day yesterday, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had this to say.
When I meet many of them, and with the families of the fallen, they say, "Our heroes did not die in vain. They were not wounded in vain." Do not stop until the Hamas monsters are eradicated. And I promise that is what we will do.
But the U.S. is so far doubtful Israel can pull it off. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell said this week the U.S. does not believe Israel can achieve its goal of total victory over Hamas and is pressing for a political solution to end the conflict as a result. Earlier this year, Israel said it had destroyed roughly 2/3 of Hamas's regiments.
And still on the same topic, the UN is now revising its previously held casualty numbers in Gaza. The UN had previously reported that out of over 34,000 deceased people, more than 9,500 were women and over 14,500 were children. The agency corrected its report last week to say that about 5,000 women have died so far and about 7,700 children passed away. Of course, it's worth noting that the UN has been relying on Hamas for these numbers. Because of that, the agency said in a disclaimer, quote, "The UN has so far not been able to produce independent, comprehensive, and verified casualty figures." Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says that Israel is in a difficult position fighting Hamas because of the group's nefarious tactics involving innocent civilians.
Israel has an unusual, even unprecedented burden in fighting this war because Hamas uses hospitals and schools and other civilian facilities for military purposes and has built a vast network of military tunnels under civilian areas. That puts innocent civilians in the crossfire. It does not lessen Israel's responsibility to do all it can to protect innocent civilians.
At the same time, Sullivan added that the Biden administration does not believe that Israel has carried out genocide in Gaza, though they expect the state to do everything it can to protect lives.
We believe Israel can and must do more to ensure the protection and well-being of innocent civilians. We do not believe what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. We have been firmly on record rejecting that proposition.
Elsewhere, Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a surprise visit to Kyiv. He touched down in Ukraine yesterday and has already met with President Volodymyr Zelensky and other high-ranking officials. The State Department says the mission there is to emphasize America's ongoing commitment to Ukraine. And the visit comes only a few days after the White House announced a new defense aid package following congressional approval of a security omnibus last month.
We know this is a challenging time, but we also know that in the near term, the assistance is now on the way. Some of it's already arrived. More of it will be arriving. And that's going to make a real difference against the ongoing Russian aggression.
The White House says they're trying to accelerate those shipments. Russian troops continue to make small advances to the north and northeast of Kharkiv. War analysts suggest that they're building up a buffer zone on the border, perhaps laying the groundwork for a much larger offensive push. All right, and up next, we'll move back into some more national news. But first, let's go to a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In this moment in history, let's explore a man who is remembered as one of the most notorious traitors of all time. After Judas Iscariot and the Roman Brutus, this man is considered the most traitorous in Western history. At the birth of the United States during the Revolutionary War, he turned his back on his cause and his country. He was once an American hero, but would ultimately defect to the British side. You probably know his name well, Benedict Arnold, notorious American traitor. Now, though his first name actually derives from the Latin word for blessed, his name has come to represent all things treasonous and backstabbing, especially in American lore. Arnold was born in 1741 and raised to be a military man. He fought in the French and Indian War as a young man, and after the war he married and had 3 children. His wife unfortunately died at a young age in 1775, the same year that the colonies declared war against the British. When the war began, Arnold enlisted in the American Army. Now, Benedict Arnold's story arc almost seems like it's something out of a movie. Before he would become a villain, he was an American hero. He suffered a leg wound in a battle in Canada in 1775, but returned to lead the Americans to a crucial success at the Battle of Lake Champlain. Arnold played a vital role in the Battle of Bemis Heights in 1777, bypassing orders from his superiors to gain an upper hand on the British. The plan worked, and this victory contributed greatly to the French joining the American cause later the next year. But here's where the story of Benedict Arnold begins to change. After re-injuring his leg, he was appointed military governor over the crucial American city of Philadelphia. Sources say he lived like a king but could not pay for it. This debt, coupled with the fact that Arnold held a fierce grudge against the American military for refusing to give him the promotion he felt he deserved, led him to commit treason. While serving as governor, he began conspiring with British Major John Andre to purposefully deliver the established American base at West Point, New York, to the British. His reward would be both monetary to pay for his many debts and a high position in the British military. Before the plan could come to fruition, however, the Continental Army captured Andre. Arnold then abandoned his post in Philadelphia and escaped to a British encampment before he too could be captured. As it turns out, Arnold's treason backfired. It lit a fire in the belly of the patriotic cause for the colonists, who were enraged upon hearing news of the devilish governor of Philadelphia who betrayed his country. The Americans used that fuel to win their freedom from Great Britain in 1783, and Arnold was forced to flee to England. He lived out his remaining days there until his death in 1801, forever remembered as one of the most wicked traitors in American history. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the Financial Issues family. Would you join us in saving the lives of babies? What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org, that is preborn.org, or financialissues.org, and click on the Preborn banner.
If investing with biblical values is important to you, you're not alone. Millions of people invest their money according to their personal beliefs. That's why we offer a subscription service that gives you access to biblically responsible stocks, buys and sells, and a portfolio tracker tool that tracks your asset allocations. Being a Financial Issues partner is the best way to ensure your investments reflect your values. At Financial Issues, we believe in providing our partners with the best possible information and resources so they can make informed decisions about their money. With our help, you can feel confident that your investments are in line with your personal beliefs. Gain access to our biblically based stock buys and sells for only $132 per year. Invest biblically, responsibly. Go to financialissues.org and become a partner today. That's financialissues.org.
Welcome back to FISM News. Well, let's continue with GameStop, where GameStop stocks made a surprise rally yesterday following the social media return of the trader that helped explode the video game retailer's stocks in 2021. Keith Gill, or Roaring Kitty, has been MIA for nearly 3 years. But yesterday he posted an image of a man leaning forward as he played a video game, seemingly implying that it's game on. In a throwback to Gill's call to buy GameStop shares during the pandemic, independent investors rushed to buy. Shares of GameStop soared 70%, from $15 apiece to more than $30, their highest level since 2022. Now, since then, those prices have jumped up and down, including a high earlier today of $80. The last time this happened, share prices crashed only weeks later.
Elsewhere, interest payments on the national debt are now the second biggest national expense behind Social Security. Federal spending on net interest recently topped $514 billion in the first 7 months of this fiscal year, and that's now outstripping spending on national defense as well as Medicare. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget warns that interest on the federal debt is also accelerating as it nearly doubled from 2020 to 2023 and is in fact now on track to reach $870 billion by the end of this year. As a result, budget hawks now say that interest payments will spiral out of control, that is, unless Congress takes action.
But I think most worrisome these days is that interest on the debt is really driving the growth at this point. And that's something the only way you can control is if we make the necessary changes of raising revenue and cutting spending. And though last year we did have one good step on that with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that's not something you see Congress really willing to tackle in any meaningful way.
And shifting now to some cultural news, where a new report on immigration into the U.S. is just providing more ammunition for Republicans against a Biden administration. FISM's Ian Patrick has those details.
New data from the Center for Immigration Studies shows that the foreign-born population within the United States has hit a new record high. In March of this year, that population sits at 51.6 million people, roughly about 15.6% of the entire U.S. population. From the year 1970 to March of this year, the foreign-born population has tripled in the U.S. Similarly, that population has nearly doubled since 1990 and increased 40% since the year 2000. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this data has to do with the Biden administration specifically. Since March of 2022, that population has jumped by 5.1 million, marking the largest two-year increase ever recorded in American history. Since the time that President Biden assumed office, the foreign-born population has increased by 6.6 million within the U.S., and these increases are remarkable because they actually reflect net changes in population and not just new arrivals. According to the report, quote, new immigrants add to the total foreign-born population but are offset by emigration and mortality among the existing immigrant population. All births to immigrants in the United States add only to the native-born population by definition. This means the number of new arrivals must be even higher for the foreign-born population to grow this much. This is a relatively big piece of data, and it's being taken and interpreted both positively and negatively, depending on who you ask. But looking closer at the data, there is a common theme of illegal immigration, which tends to crop up rather quickly. In fact, CIS estimates, quote, 58% of the increase in the total foreign-born population since President Biden took office was due to illegal immigration. Under that estimation alone, the illegal immigrant population in the U.S. has likely increased by 3.8 million since Biden's ascension to the Oval Office. And this is obviously a result of the Biden administration's immediate changes in immigration policy. But CIS also recognizes that their reported number of illegal immigrants in the nation isn't representative of the actual number, which they say is likely much, much higher. CIS also analyzed that current population growth in the United States is driven primarily by immigration, both legal and illegal. Should current trends continue, as it is shown in this data set, then foreign-born individuals could comprise as much as 23% of the American population by the year 2040, and that's roughly 82.2 million people. Now, some Americans, particularly Republicans, conservatives, and others on the right, are rightfully highlighting some concerns coming out of this data, specifically highlighting the illegal immigration problem and the other type of illegal activity that tends to come with that. But one of the greatest concerns actually zooms out on the problem and looks at the erosion of assimilation into an American identity, which is something previously brought up and summarized by Texas Representative Chip Roy on the House floor.
Are we teaching people about Western civilization? Are we teaching people about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the rule of law? Are we teaching them Western values? Are we teaching them God exists? Are we teaching them the importance of freedom? Or are we teaching an entire generation or two or three to run around complaining about what's wrong and why the entire world is against them because of their skin color, their sex, their supposed gender identity, whatever the hell category we create to make people have an excuse for not just stepping up and achieving the American dream.
Immigration is very likely to play an important role in the presidential elections this year, and most Americans are actually looking to put a bit of a tightening policy around it to prevent mass immigration like we've seen. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thank you so much, Ian. That's always an important topic, but one that's getting more and more important as the days go by. Meanwhile, transgender students in the state of Mississippi, they'll no longer be able to use the bathroom of their choice. Republican Governor Tate Reeves signed the so-called Securing Areas for Females Effectively and Responsibly Act, also known as the SAFER Act, yesterday. What the bill does is it requires students in public school to use bathrooms matching their biological sex, which the law defines specifically as solely determined by birth without regard to the fluidity of how someone acts or feels. Governor Reeves posted on X, quote, "It's mind-blowing that this is what Joe Biden's America has come to. Having to pass common sense policies that protect women's spaces was unimaginable just a few years ago, but here we are." By the way, the bill also applies to changing rooms, locker rooms, and similar spaces as well. Violations of the law could result in lawsuits.
Meanwhile, in Louisiana, abortion drugs are on the chopping block. The state is planning on criminalizing over-the-counter abortion-inducing drugs. This would specifically include two drugs, mifepristone and misoprostol. Both of these would be considered a controlled dangerous substance, sharing the category of narcotics, steroids, and depressants per Axios. If the legislation is approved, Louisiana would be the first state to criminalize these abortion pills that come without a valid prescription or outside a professional doctor's office. The potential law prompted 200 doctors in the state to petition against criminalizing these pills, and this all comes as the Supreme Court is expected to rule on access to these abortion drugs in the coming weeks. And while on the topic of abortion and the profile movement, we ask you to come alongside Preborn for their Mother's Day drive this month. Go to preborn.com/FISM to learn more.
That's right. There's a special match and everything. Again, you can go to their website to donate or just to learn more. It's preborn.com, preborn.com/FISM.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates, until next time, you can check us out on social media. We would love for you to follow us there, or you can download the FISM app to take us wherever you go. Thanks so much. God bless, and we'll catch you tomorrow night with more news coverage. See you then.